Green Hill, St. Anne, in 1960, was a quiet place tucked away in the emerald hills of rural Jamaica. The air was thick with the scent of pimento trees and the rhythmic hum of the breeze sweeping across the land. Life here was simple, and for Jacob, it was a life filled with hard work. A carpenter by trade, Jacob had long learned the value of shaping rough wood into something useful, something beautiful. It was the only way he knew how to survive. The day had been long, and the sun was dipping behind the hills, casting an amber glow over the dusty road that led home. Jacob wiped the sweat from his brow, his hands calloused from years of working in the tropical heat. His thoughts drifted to the future, a future where he could build something more, a dream home, a beautiful family, and a life beyond the limitations of poverty. But for now, the small, modest wooden house that stood on the edge of Greenhill was all he had. As he rounded a bend, he spotted something unusual by the side of the road. At first, it looked like a bundle of discarded clothes, but as he came closer, he saw it was a woman, collapsed, beaten, and barely conscious. Her dress was torn, and her face bore the marks of violence, swollen, bruised, and caked in dried blood. Without a single thought, Jacob knelt beside her, his heart pounding with urgency. Miss, Miss, you all right? He asked, his voice soft but firm. She groaned, her eyes fluttering open for a moment before shutting again. Her breath was shallow. Jacob's mind raced. There was no nearby house, no one to call for help. But he knew he couldn't leave her here. With surprising ease, he lifted her frail body into his arms and continued the trek back to his home. She was light, as if she hadn't eaten in days. As he carried her, he wondered who could have done this to her and why. His house was small, but clean and sturdy. Jacob laid the woman gently on his bed, covering her with a thin sheet. He fetched a basin of water and a cloth, carefully cleaning her wounds. His hands were steady, though his mind was buzzing with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? He worked in silence, nursing her with care and caution. The woman stirred, moaning in pain as she regained her consciousness, her eyes frantic, dark and wide, searching the unfamiliar room before landing on Jacob. You're safe, he said softly. My name Jacob. You're all right now. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but then winced, her throat too dry for words. Jacob fetched a cup of water, gently lifting it to her lips. She drank slowly, her gaze never leaving his face. There was fear in her eyes, but also a flicker of relief. Over the next few days, Jacob continued to care for her, feeding her small portions of food, tending to her wounds, and giving her the space to heal. She rarely spoke, only to tell him thanks and offering her name after several days, Grace. It was a fitting name, Jacob thought, for someone who had survived whatever horrors she had endured. He didn't press her for details. He knew better than to touch a wound before it was adequately healed. As Grace gained her strength, she began helping Jacob around the house. She was quiet, but resolute, and was very capable, sweeping the floor, washing the few dishes they had, and slowly, an unspoken partnership forged between them. The small house felt less lonely with her presence, and Jacob found himself drawn to her resilience, her quiet strength. He hadn't intended for his home to become a refuge, but now it felt like one for both of them. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the dry harbor mountains, casting long shadows through the small windows, Grace opened up. She told Jacob about the man who had attacked her, someone she had trusted, someone who she loved, who had turned on her in a moment of rage and hurt her. She had escaped, but barely. Fleeing into the woods with no plan, no destination, she ran for her life. Jacob listened without judgment, his heart heavy with empathy. You don't have to worry about him again, he said. Me will protect you, and I will never hurt you. And so they continued to build their lives together. Jacob's work as a carpenter expanded as he took Grace's design advice, and eventually she became his partner, both in life and in labor. She learned the craft of carpentry alongside him, her hands as deft as his in shaping the wood, and they began to dream of building more than just homes and furniture for others. They dreamt of a future together. In the background of their lives, the country was changing. Jamaica, on the cusp of independence, was filled with a new kind of hope, a hope that mirrored the dreams Jacob and Grace shared. The streets of the island buzzed with talk of independence, and the island's music was evolving. Mento was beckoning ska, reflecting the evolutionary spirit of a people ready to stand on their own. But for now, Jacob and Grace focused on the simple things. They began focusing on furniture, which they sold at local markets. They planted almost everything they ate in their garden behind the house, ensuring they would always have the meals they enjoyed. And they focused on learning each other. Each day brought new challenges, but with each other, they felt stronger. There was love growing between them, unspoken, but undeniable. As 1960 drew to a close, Jacob and Grace stood on the edge of a new chapter, not just for themselves, but for Jamaica. They had started with nothing, but together they were building something beautiful.